Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the Tuesday stream. I hope everyone's having an awesome Tuesday morning. Hey Astro, how's it going? Happy Tuesday. Hope you're feeling better. London is 10 degrees Celsius, going to 17 on Thursday. Very mild for December. For late December, gray sky but no rain. Well, no rain is good, yeah? No rain is good. I am feeling much better. Thank you for that. I still have a very stuffy. A very stuffy head, but that's okay. Like, what I'm trying to say is, I am a lot better than I sound. There we go. You sound gruffy. Yeah, probably. I probably will sound gruffy for just this last day, probably, as all the, stuffiness starts to go away. But that's no big deal. Okay. Let me just make sure we got everything going here. Folks, there's only a couple more days left. There's only a couple days more left in 2021. For New Year's, I think what we're gonna do is probably just have a small family dinner. And I think that's about it. That's right, this Saturday. This Saturday is a new year. We're gonna walk into 2022 nice and slow. Nobody touch anything, okay? We're all gonna walk into this very nice and easy and slow, and nobody touch anything, okay? We're gonna do this nice and slow. We're gonna walk into 2022 tiptoeing, not making a single noise. None of this. This is gonna be our year. Nothing, okay? We're gonna walk into this nice and easy. Are you superstitious? Do you do anything for New Year's? Good luck, health, prosperity, etc. Not really, not like that. First of all, howdy, welcome. Mostly what we do is just kind of have a family. It's a family reunion, basically, where we have dinner and stuff like that. But the reality is, in my opinion, any time's as good as any to set goals, to better yourself, to I don't know, whatever it is that you want to do or want to achieve. Any time's as good as any, right? I understand that the new year kind of gives a encouragement, which should absolutely, that's fine if you are encouraged to do better. this coming up year, because it's the new year and you want to do better. You want to come into 2022 with a game plan. That's good. But me personally, I just like the fact that we get to spend time with friends and family. I'm not superstitious most of the time, but I do have to clean my house before New Year's Eve. The house must be in order. Yeah, that's a common thing. I think my mom does that too. I think my mom does that too. Alright, let me make sure I got everything going. Alright. We've got quite the amount of headlines to go through. So we're going to start with this one. This is a feel-good story, so I figure we should start with this one. Virginia family gets the keys to Habitat for Humanity's first 3D printed home in the United States. That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. One would say it's even poggers. One Virginia family received the keys to the new 3D printed home in time for Christmas. The home is Habitat for Humanity's first 3D printed home in the nation, according to the Habitat news release. Janet Green, CEO of Habitat for Humanity Peninsula and Greater Williamsburg, told CNN it partnered with Alquist, a 3D printing company, earlier this year to begin the process. Alquist crew printed the house. That is so cool. So we have the technology. We have the capability to literally 3D print houses and just give them to people. Huh. Interesting. The 1,200 square foot home has 3 bedrooms, 2 full baths, and was built from concrete. The technology was allowed the home to be built in just 12 hours, which saves about 4 weeks of construction time for a typical home. That's amazing. That is amazing. 12 hours later, you have a house standing. April Springfield purchased a home through Habitat Homebuyer Program. She'll move in with her 13-year-old son just in time for the holidays. Nice. My son and I are so thankful, Springfield said in a live streamed on Habitat's Facebook page. I always wanted to be a homeowner. It's like a dream come true. Yeah, it turns out, I know, it turns out. But it turns out that people do want to be homeowners. They want houses. They want housing. They need housing. To purchase the home, Springfield logged hundreds of hours of sweat equity, Green told CNN, which is one of the requirements for home buyers to the program. Every Habitat affiliate in the nation and worldwide sells homes to partner families who have low to moderate incomes. They must have and maintain good credit and be willing to partner with us. Well, here's that. That's a problem. That's a problem. I'm excited to make new memories in Williamsburg and especially in a home. Someplace I can call home and give my son that backyard that he can play in and also my puppy to run around the yard. The concrete used in the in the house's 3D construction has many long-term benefits such as the ability to retain temperature and withstand natural disaster like tornadoes and hurricanes. I would even go further and say, is it possible to do something like hempcrete at this point and 3D print homes? Stringsfield's home also includes a personal 3D printer that will allow her to reprint anything she may need, everything from an electrical outlet to trim to cabinet knobs. That's amazing. While this is the first 3D home for Habitat Humanity in the US, it certainly won't be the last. Green told CNN it hopes to continue partnering and developing the technology used with printing. We would love to build more with this technology, especially because it's got long-term savings for the homeowners. Yeah, imagine having a house that A, is 3D printed in 12 hours, B, has a in-house 3D printer to replace anything that might get damaged. That's just amazing. You will never need anything else in terms of home home stuff. You would never need anything else. No more trips to the what is it called? Hardware stores. With the exception of some tools, I guess. With the exception of some tools and maybe things that can't be 3D printed, but if you can 3D print anything from electrical outlets to cabinet knobs, I think you're pretty good. Overall, I think that this kind of shows us that we do have the capacity. We do have the capacity to provide homes. We do have the capacity to provide housing for those that need with 12 hours. In 12 hours, we can have a completely full standing house. And I think the TLDR of this story is that we absolutely could. We just choose not to deploy this as a widespread governmental program, right? The thing that gets me though is you have to have good credit. Like, okay, but if you're poor and you're forced into like bad debt through no fault of your own other than, well, jobs pay like crap, cost of living is very hard to keep up with, and you have no choice but to get yourself in debt sometimes to make it. There are people who literally have to get into debt just so that they can make their payments for food, for their home rent or mortgage, gasoline to get to their house, to their work, they have to incur debt to extend the time or extend that little paycheck that they have. This sounds great on the surface. I would like to dig down a bit on all the components, materials, and the carbon footprint. I doubt it's as environmentally friendly and economically efficient as we are hearing. No, I think that it is well, for sure it's definitely economically more efficient. Because, well, think about all the labor costs. Think about all the costs that you're saving by just 3D printing it. The thing is, about the carbon footprint, well, you may have an argument as, well, undeniably, concrete has a carbon footprint. But overall, I mean, it doesn't sound like it's using a lot of other stuff, of other materials that otherwise would be necessary as well. So I would like to think, or I would like to guess that it's probably better, I would say. This shows that building housing is possible. The government could do it on a large and equitable scale, but instead nonprofits like Habitat for Humanity do it and play a role in gentrification across the country. Yeah, that's a fair critique. That is a fair critique. I think that that's exactly what we should be taking from it, is the fact that it can be done. Every time the knowledge that it's possible and yet it's not being done is a indecision. That's it. The fact that we know that we can, in tried and true technology, with tried and true technology, I should say, then yeah, this is a policy failure, I guess, is what we would say. The fact that it can be done, and it is not being done, that's a choice. That is a choice. It doesn't say how long it took to pour the concrete. The transport machinery materials are important. Then there's a matter of land and terrain where they build is important. Well, yeah, I mean, I assume it's not going to be that much different for transportation. And the entire house was done in 12 hours. The entire house itself was done in 12 hours. You could also say, you know what, maybe you're right. Maybe we could do it in even more sustainable methods. Maybe we could make the transportation system much more efficient, which should be done across the board anyways. Sure, maybe we could even switch regular concrete for hempcrete. That's more sustainable. The source of power that these machines require could be from renewable energy. Could do that. Oh my god. Wow. No, the whole thing took 12 hours. Seems to be skinned in other materials. Well, maybe the roof. But you can 3D print that.
Family and friends can come and share that moment with me.
All of that 3D printed. What? Meet the 6-year-old who's a certified professional farmer? What? All of that is 3D printed. It comes with its own 3D printer. If you need to 3D print a outlet or anything like that, you can 3D print it and replace it. That's how awesome this house is. Instead of buying more stuff, you just 3D print it in home. How about that? I'm almost scared to click on this story. Meet the 6-year-old who's a certified professional farmer. Is this gonna be one of those like, here, let us excuse child labor?
Subaru?
Ah. Hey, howdy howdy. Morning. Speaking of reorganizing our priorities. Speaking of reorganizing our priorities. Wait, what is this? Oh, okay. Huh. Okay. The media's blaming Biden for lack of tests of COVID, not news, not new blame. Well, to be fair, didn't the Biden administration just order like 1 billion tests or something like that? Didn't the Biden administration just like order 1 billion new tests? True? Okay. Yeah, like, out of all the things, that you could criticize Biden for, I don't think that that's one of them. I don't think that that's one of them. While it is true that we're facing a, shortage in tests, because everybody's getting tested, that is not the fault of the Biden administration. They're trying to alleviate that situation by buying 1 billion more. But testing means more cases. Didn't you listen to Trump? That's right. That's right, Pat Rat. That's right. That's right. You know what? I actually do listen to Trump. Here. Let me play one of his favorite quotes.
I recommend take the vaccines. I did it. It's good. Take the vaccine.
I thought I saw Joe talking to governors yesterday. He said 500 million tests to be distributed to the states. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. I'm actually gonna look this up right now. Sorry, I was wrong. Sorry, I was wrong. It's half a billion. Not 1 billion, half billion. Yep. That's it right there. Half billion. The White House on YouTube channel has it? Yeah. I'm sure they have plenty of conferences about this. Speaking of reorganizing our priorities, Biden signs a $768 billion defense policy bill that supersized his original Pentagon request. Because what this nation needs, undeniably, what this country needs, undeniably, is about 50 billion more on the defense budget. That's right. President Biden signed a $768 billion defense policy bill on Monday after Democrats and Republicans rejected his initial Pentagon plans and endorsed a major boost to military spending. It was on both of them. The enactment of the Compromise National Defense Authorization Act, which was rolled out in its final form and passed the House and Senate overwhelmingly this month, marks a 61st consecutive year Pentagon policy legislation has become law. The White House announced Biden signed the bill into law in a statement. The bill rejects Biden's $715 Pentagon budget request and instead calls for $740 billion for the Defense Department. Yeah, because again, that's what we need to be focusing on, right? That's what we need to be focusing on. While Biden's request amounted to a military spending increase above the current levels, Republicans quickly panned the blueprint as insufficient to keep up pace with inflation and military advances by China and Russia. Most Democrats on Capitol Hill agreed, and both the House and Senate backed further budget increase in their respective versions of the defense bill. Okay, even if you spent half of that, I think you would still be outpacing both of them. There is a COVID-19 pill now. Yes, there's a couple actually. But here, I think Pfizer? Pfizer was the one that made the first one here. In all, the bill authorizes $768 billion for the national defense programs, which include Pentagon, a nuclear weapons program overseen by the Department of Energy. The defense policy bill only authorizes spending and doesn't actually allocate any money. Lawmakers must still strike a deal to fund the government for the rest of the fiscal year for the defense increase to become reality. This is absurd. In the meantime, the Pentagon and other federal agencies are frozen at the previous year's funding level cemented under President Trump. For defense, that means total funding is lower than even the level that Biden proposed, and that Congress rejected as not enough. Wow. Amazing. Amazing. The authorized budget boost would translate into billions more for weapons procurement, including more planes and ships than the Pentagon requested. Why? Why? An even bigger question I would like to ask is, where is the fiscal responsibility when it comes to making a bill for $768 billion? Where's that good old fiscal responsibility? Huh? Where's the outrage? Where's the outrage about how we need to take a step back and really dive into the details about what we're spending on here? Where's that attitude? Where's the, hey, we need to pump the brakes, $768 billion. We need to pump the brakes on this. We need to figure out if we really even need that much. Where's the tightening up of the belt when it comes to spending $768 billion, even above what the Pentagon requested, because Joe Manchin wants it? No. This one is on everybody. This one is on everybody. With the exception of Biden, because I think he proposed an even smaller one, but, yeah. I think you're right, Astro. I think you're right. But it's not going to handouts except for wealthy arms manufacturers, and it's not socialism, so spending is A-okay. I would argue it is, since we're using this type of rhetoric, it is the biggest social spending that we do. This is the defense bill is the defense budget is the biggest social spending that we do. Don't you love the armed forces? I love people, okay, and I don't see the necessity for spending $768 billion on this. The Space Force Netflix, so that's true. All of that is useless in terms of what we could or what we should be focusing on, right? The Based Bastard. Thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Welcome. It's always funny watching these defense bills get passed unanimously almost without no pushback whatsoever. No pushback whatsoever, with the exception of the usual. You know, even with the exception of Rand Paul, and like Bernie Sanders, both for different reasons. Rand Paul just opposes any governmental spending. Whatever. In this case, he just stumbled onto the correct side. But with the exception of Rand Paul and like Bernie Sanders, there's no real pushback, and a handful in comparison to the almost 300. How much does Congress and the Senate have together? I think it's over 300, right? Between the 50 senators and 200 and something Congress people. Only a handful oppose this massive defense bill. I wouldn't mind if we put all that money into Army Corps of Engineers and medical military professionals. Yeah, but even then, I mean, we don't need $768 billion to do that. It's just a reorganization of priorities. But instead, we would procure more planes and ships than we even need. The military is a huge climate change causer, that is true, and a huge chunk of the electorate depend on it to put food on their tables who would vote to starve. Well, that's the thing, Astro. We don't have to do that. This is for the procurement of more equipment, of more ships, of more planes than we even need. Gotcha. Thank you, Alio. I was in the army, I'd love to debate you all. Listen, this isn't a debate channel, okay? Just because I'm a closeted debate bro, doesn't mean that I'm gonna sit here and do debates. But no, if you're trying to excuse the mammoth increase of spending to the military, you're just wrong. Gotcha, Alio. Yeah, so all of these members of Congress, members of the Senate, but a handful are the only ones pushing back on this. Is just unbelievable to me. And I find it really funny that we always talk about how we need to tighten our belts. We always talk about the necessity of the budget, the necessity of being fiscally responsible when it comes to things like the expansion of Medicare, community college, expanding the child tax credits, addressing the climate crisis. All of a sudden, we've got to talk about numbers. All of a sudden, we got to talk about the entitlement mentality that it might encourage in the American people. All of a sudden, these things become very, very, very important. Numbers are all of a sudden... sorry, not numbers. Price tags, all of a sudden, are important. Right now, the US must have the lowest number of defense personnel overseas since the Second World War. What? We have bases all over the world. The top Democrats have touted a variety of legislative victories in the final bill, including an overhaul of how the military justice system handles sexual assault and other related crimes. Okay, that's fair. The final legislation also incorporates language backed by Democrats that bars private funding for cross-state National Guard deployments except during natural disaster emergency responses. Okay. Except, why the increase? Except why the increase, okay? Why is it so necessary to increase the military's budget each time? And furthermore, what exactly is the purpose? If the Pentagon is asking you for X amount of planes and you just keep giving them more, who's really reaping the rewards of that, right? Then you have to start thinking, wait a minute, somebody builds these planes, right? Somebody builds these ships. Somebody builds these planes and builds these ships. Very nice. Nice meme. Nice meme. There's a lot to be proud of in this bill, House Armed Service Chair Adam Smith said in a statement. Ultimately, this year's National Defense Authorization Act focuses on what makes our country strong: economy, diversity, innovation, allies and partners, and democratic values, and our troops. Wait. Democratic values and our troops? What does that have to do with building way more planes than we even asked for? What? Are these allies getting more planes? What? That's right, Alio, because technology is always advancing. Okay, and? That's not an excuse. That is a horrible excuse. One big chunk of the military budget must be to fix the lives of the injured and damaged people it has employed. Yeah, there's a thought. Technology advancing isn't a justification for, what, $50+ billion extra? Still, Republicans see the legislation as a conservative policy win based on only what was concluded in the compromise bill, but also provisions that were scuttled in negotiations. Despite Democrats controlling both chambers of Congress and the White House, the final bill received more votes from Republicans. The top House Armed Services Republican, Mike Rogers of Alabama, praised the bill's crucial funding increase on focus on competition with Beijing and Moscow. Okay. Our work is not finished as we approach the new year. Our nation faces unprecedented aggression and threats from near-peer adversaries, namely China and Russia. Saber-rattling. Combating these threats will continue to be our #1 priority as we look to fiscal year 23. More saber-rattling. We could decrease the military budget and still be leaps and bounds above what any of those two countries put together spend. I believe NATO is very important, so I'm glad the USA is back in. However, it does cost a lot. Well, that's right, with Vice President Kamala Harris as the deciding vote in the Senate. Should it come to a 50-50, she does. In addition to seeing their proposed $25 billion budget increase adopted, nice! The GOP lawmakers cheered a provision that bars the military service from dishonorably discharging members solely for refusing COVID vaccines. Conservatives also scored a victory by torpedoing a proposal for requiring women to register for a military draft. The expansion of the selective service system was included in both House and Senate bills and backed by bipartisan majorities, but the Republicans ultimately won the concession to strike it from the final deal. Republicans also touted the exclusion of a proposal sponsored by Representative Anthony Brown and backed by Democrats that would establish a Pentagon office dedicated to countering extremism in the military. Why? That's weird. Is there like a reason for that? That's kind of weird. The lack of more expansive anti-extremism provisions and a broader overhaul to the military justice system that removes commanders' authorities to prosecute all felonies pushed by Kirsten Gillibrand was enough for some Democrats to oppose the final bill. Yeah, so this was a total failure, in my opinion. This was a total failure. Total failure. And the only people who could tout this as a win is the Republican Party. The only people that took a W on this one is the Republican Party, because all they have to do is like, hey, look, we are pro troops or something. We increased it by whatever tens of billions amounts of dollars. That was us. Overall, this is a waste of money, in my opinion. You want to talk about a waste of money? The defense budget is a great recruiter for the GOP. It could be touted as a win, like just politically. It could be touted as a W. What a waste of money. What a waste of money. We could be reorganizing our priorities to have or to secure housing. We could reorganize our priorities to make sure people have healthcare. We could be reorganizing our priorities for people to have food. We could be reorganizing our priorities for people to have education. But instead, both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are effectively saved the handful who are opposing it, but for the most part, the overwhelming majority of Congress just seems to rubber stamp this waste of money, but always seems to have a problem when it comes to actually doing something for the American people. I think that's the sad part of this whole thing. Reorganize priorities to prevent the climate crisis or climate change? Yeah, I mean, sure. All of this could be an infinitely more useful, more useful way of spending that money than the military. Literally spending $768 billion on the military could be way better spent on a numerous amount of things that we need. But that's just me. Maybe I'm just too radical. Maybe I'm just thinking too Maybe I'm just thinking too radical. Imagine a world, imagine a United States where we actually prioritize our citizens. We actually give people what they need to have a basis for a quality of life, such as food, housing, education, and healthcare. Imagine a United States that uses its economic power to strengthen, create ties, repair the damage with the global south. Imagine a United States that is interested in creating the biggest expansion of green infrastructure on the planet. Talk about missing out on American exceptionalism, huh? Surely that 680 billion is just an increase and not the total? No, that's the total. The increase, the original was about 715. We can do math here. So 768 about 53 billion increase. Housing, lower interest rate, better banking regulations, affordable housing, and housing for homeless. Yeah, sure. Healthcare, food, and childcare and school. Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with expanding or creating a national or universal healthcare system that covers everybody. There's nothing wrong with creating governmental programs to build houses for the homeless. Clearly we have the ability to. I just illustrated that. Clearly there should be no reason why anybody in this country should be going hungry. Legitimately no reason. Why we can't make sure that people have food. There's no reason, there's no good reason. There's no reason why there should be nobody, there should be people with medical debt. There's people thinking twice about going to get preventative care because it costs money. There's no reason or excuse that could change. There's no reason or excuse to allow this. I just woke up, I found your channel, I got just got the press cause America. Well, I mean, we're here, so hey, if you woke up, then you've got then you're still here. Therefore, you should still do what you can in the time that you have and with the tools that you have. If you woke up and you're here, then there's still things that you can do. While the black pill is real, we should try to avoid that as much as possible. Anyways, TLDR, sucks that we're spending all of this money on the military when we can reorganize our priorities and make life better. Hey, remember when we had an election and a certain someone got super giga triggered thinking that there was a bunch of dead people voting? Well, it turns out that wasn't true. Alleged dead Georgia voters found alive and well after 2020 election. Oh man, this guy just continues to take L's after L's. Amazing. False claims that there was thousands of ballots cast in the name of dead Georgia voters can now rest in peace. Election investigators found that just 4 absentee ballots in all... Election investigators found just 4 absentee ballots in the 2020 presidential election from voters who had died. All of them returned by relatives. Wow. Out of how many people voted in Georgia? How many people voted in Georgia? How many people voted in Georgia 2020? Wow. Over 4 million. Over 4 million. UK government told councils to house all rough sleepers in England by weekend. Government's urgent request was welcome. Hey, that's a thought. $4 million votes were counted. A total. A massive, ginormous total of 4 ballots were found to be illegitimate. Wow. Election investigators just found 4 absentee ballots in the 2020 presidential election from voters who had died, all of them returned by relatives. The state election board referred the cases to the Attorney General's office this month after investigators reviewed dozens of allegations. Almost all voters were found to be alive. The tiny number of ballots actually cast on behalf of deceased voters contrasts with then President Trump's false accusations that there was 5,000 dead voters in the Georgia election. It's the latest in a series of unsubstantiated claims of fraud that have been since debunked, including allegations of counterfeit ballots, ballot stuffing, forged absentee ballot signatures. 3 vote counts showed that Trump lost by about 12,000 votes in Georgia. Yeah. This dude can stay mad. In one case, a 74-year-old widow submitted an absentee ballot on behalf of her husband, William Nelson, after he died in September of 2020. He was going to vote Republican, and she said, well, I'm going to cancel your ballot because I'm voting Democrat. It was kind of a joke between them. Barry Bishop, an attorney for Sharon Nelson of Canton, told the state election board she received the absentee ballot and carried out his wishes. Now she was realizing that's not the thing to do. I mean, there's consequences. There's consequences for taking these actions. And again, this is just a testament to how thorough our election systems, our election integrity can be, should there be serious inquiry as to potential fraud, right? If we really want to make sure we have all the tools necessary to root out any type of fraud, and you will be caught. Plain and simple, there will be consequences, and you will be caught. But the reality is the amount of fraud is just statistically not even seen. 4 ballots were found to be legitimately fraudulent out of 4 million votes casted in Georgia alone. Think about that. Think about that. So in other words, a total of 0.00000000001% of ballots were fraudulent. In another case, a ballot was submitted for deceased Augusta voter Leon Rowe. Investigators found that the signature on his absentee ballot matched the handwriting of his mother, Eileen Rowe, who died in October of 2020. Earlier this year, the state election board found evidence that Sherry Cook of Tryon had submitted an absentee ballot for her husband Donald Cook, who died several months before the election. A board also moved forward with the case, which the widow of Herman Robert Jackson of Covington, Glenda Jackson, told investigators she filled out his ballot because she knew how he would want it to vote. Okay. Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger said during a recent telephone town hall that the allegations of large numbers of dead people voting are just untrue. The state election board has the power to levy fines of anywhere between $100 to $5,000 per violation. I heard 5 ballot frauds in Florida retirement complex. The majority were Republican. That's a nice meme. But even then, I mean, how many votes were casted in Florida? Turnout. No, I want to know how many people voted. Not the breakdown. Wow, turnout was 77% of registered voters. Okay, so just as a quick breakdown, about 5.6 million voted for Trump, 5.2 million voted for Biden. So we can safely say just, I would say about almost 11 million, if not over just 11 million. And 5 were found fraudulent. Wow, nice. It's part of projection of stealing elections onto the Dems. Gerrymandering is a far bigger threat than voter fraud. I would say so, but, you know. Until the rules change to deal with gerrymandering, yeah. Making the Dems prove a negative is hard, but it's all just misdirection anyway. Don't you dare look at the real corruption. We gotta make sure nobody looks at the real rampant stuff. Well, that seems to be the case across the board. Anyways, about 11 million people voted in Florida. And if the most damning evidence that you can present is 5, Anyways, the TLDR of this is just another L for Donald Trump, another L for the GOP, who continues to perpetuate this idea that there was some rampant, massive fraud across the board. And anyone who tells you that this is why we need election integrity laws is just straight up lying. It's just straight up lying. Because then the follow-up question is, well, okay, sure. Election integrity is good and important. That's how we have one of the fail-safes and reasons why we trust democracies, because we have election integrity. Can you point out to me exactly where the massive problems are? That's the follow-up question to anybody who tells you that they're all about election integrity and we need to do X, Y, and Z. Really? Okay. Fair point. Exactly why and exactly where is this happening? Yeah. They also want to go to paper ballot systems because the paper ballot system is also tried and true method of election fraud for 2,000 years. I don't know about that. Any system can be used or manipulated, I guess. But the reality is exoterror. Okay, I'm not even going to pretend I can pronounce that. Exoterror stratagems. There we go. Exo is fine. Okay, that works. The reality is, like, we have backups to our backups. We have the paper ballot, which goes into the system. That system creates a backup, right? So we count those votes. Then, if we need to, we do a machine recount. If we need to, there is a paper trail to actually count them by hand, should we need to do that too. Like, there's definitely fail-safes and backups to our systems. Our election, the way we do, like, the handling of ballots and stuff like that is, I would say, pretty robust, okay? Pretty robust. We still have paper ballots in Massachusetts because our Secretary of State refused to give them up. That's fine. You have paper ballots that you can insert in machines or whatever. I mean, that's fine. I see no problems with the way we handle elections in terms of our system of counting. Our system of counting and tabulating ballots have been just fine. Yeah, the digital system is 100 times more efficient. Have a backup paper system is great. Yeah, which is what most of our states have anyways. Most of them. Like, that's how we do things in Florida. We have a paper ballot that you fill out. You insert it into the machine counts it, and it has a paper ballot backup. Yeah. I mean, like, most of our electoral system is like that anyways. So there's no real reason to tell me that there is a massive problem with election integrity to push your nonsense laws, which I believe Astro touched on it, to tell me and to convince me otherwise. The right talking heads keep saying to go wallpaper, and I'm saying that's a bad idea going backwards. Yeah, I mean, there's no need. If it's not broken, don't fix it. Jesus Christ. If it's not broken, don't fix it. I remember hanging chads. I don't know what that is, actually. Is that a meme? I feel like that's a meme. Anyways, anybody telling you to, trying to push election integrity laws, Ask them what exactly is it intending to solve and where's the big problem. And ask them to prove why it's a big... ask them to prove why there's a problem with our election integrity. We keep chasing after the BS lies of the GOP. It's pointless. It's not necessarily pointless. I don't mean to like, I don't know, if you're continuously trying to engage with somebody, yeah, you're not going to change that person unless they want, unless they're open to it. But if I see continuous lies and BS, there's got to be some type of counter to it, right? There's got to be some type of counter narrative to kind of correct that, or else that's the only thing that gets put out there, right? But if you're like if you're just battling it out on Twitter or something, I wouldn't do that. CDC shortens recommended COVID-19 isolation and quarantine time. The U.S. Center for Disease Control on Monday shortened the recommended time that people should isolate when they've tested positive for COVID-19 from 10 to 5 days if they don't have symptoms and if they wear a mask around others for at least 5 more days. Okay, so this is very specific, okay? This is very specific. This doesn't mean that if you happen to test positive for COVID, it is not a green light for you to go out back after 5 days. This is very specific. A, you must be asymptomatic. You must not, in other words, you don't show symptoms. Is probably a more accurate way of describing it. You don't show symptoms, and 2, you should wear a mask around other people for another 5 days. That's the 2 stipulations, okay? This is not a green light to just go and go out into the world after 5 days. The CDC also shortened recommended time for people to quarantine if they're exposed to the virus to a similar 5 days if they're vaccinated. 3rd stipulation. People who are fully vaccinated and boosted may not need to be quarantined at all. I think that strengthens the argument for vaccination. The Florida recount of 2000, a nightmare that goes on haunting Chad's legal challenge. I don't know what Chad is, but for sure it was a nightmare, and because of that nightmare, we actually don't have a bad system of handling elections because of that. To be quite fair, say what you will about Florida, which I agree, but the one thing that we do have is a robust electoral system, like how we run elections. For the most part, we have a very robust, very good, very accurate system. Given what we currently know about COVID-19 and the Omicron variant, CDC is shortening the recommended time for isolation from 10 days with people of COVID to 5 days if asymptomatic, followed by 5 days of wearing a mask when around others. There we go. People whose symptoms are getting better may also leave their homes after 5 days so long as their symptoms are improving. People who have a fever should stay home until the fever clears up. This change is motivated by science demonstrating that the majority of SARS-CoV transmission occurs early in the course of illness, generally 1 and 2 days prior to onset of symptoms and 2 to 3 days after. Therefore, People who test positive should isolate for 5 days, and if asymptomatic at that time, they may leave isolation. They can continue to wear a mask for 5 days to minimize the risk of infecting others. So there we go. This is updated science. This is not this. This is updated science based on whatever new research is coming in. In fact, if you're asymptomatic, then your time in quarantine should be about 5 days. If, again, these are very specific, so I want people to, just go to the CDC website, look at their latest thing. But it should be A, if you're asymptomatic, and B, for the remainder of those 5 days. Yes. Wear a mask, basically, just as a precaution, right? That's it. And if you're vaccinated and boosted, and you're asymptomatic, then you should be okay after the 5 days. Depending, you may not even need to quarantine. I've heard that double masking is more important for Omicron. I think that it just depends on the mask as well, right? I think sometimes the US gives the illusion of a system in crisis when it comes to elections purely because there are different policies from state to state, and it amplifies a sense of confusion for people who want to casually observe it. Although they should definitely still be looking for a long-term plan of having national elections all working by the same rules. Yeah, that is true. That is a good point. But it also kind of, which I understand where that framing comes from, but you could also flip it around and say, well, that's why it's so robust, because you can't just cheat the system like that. You would have to have a unfathomable level of coordination to know each state and their rules and how to, and have people on the ground of every single state, or enough states. It's also decentralized that it's not impossible, but almost to really have like a coordinated effort to flip an election, right? That's kind of I could flip that around and say that's why we have such a robust and good election integrity, right? Chads are what punched out the cart that were used in the 2000 election in Florida. Oh, gotcha. That's the argument that I use, because while I agree with you, it'd be nice if we just had a one-size-fits-all, one system working by the same rules to make everything easier. To actually manipulate an election in your favor would require an unbelievably complex plan, as well as being able to understand turnout properly, and also likely to have power anyway, which begs the question as to why you'd even want to rig anything if you already are there. Yeah, that makes sense. So like that's kind of that's exactly. So none of these like allegations or none of these conspiracy theories hold any type of water in any way, shape, or form. They're based on like a kernel of truth, like 5 people, or 4 people in the case of Georgia were found to be legitimately illegitimate ballots, I should say. Cheating is easier when it's just 50 states voting laws instead of weaseling enough votes to change an election through the system. Yeah, I mean, which is why I am actually saying that if you hear people talk about we need to improve election integrity and we need to have all of these laws in place and stuff like that, the first question that comes to mind is, well, where's the problem? Show me the problem. And follow up to that, will your laws actually address that problem? Should you be able to prove to me that that's the problem? That there is a problem in the first place, sorry. The electoral votes seem to be the weak link, nothing to do with voter fraud or election integrity. Yeah, the electoral college is kind of a meme, right, at this point. Alternatively, if a 5-day quarantine is not feasible, it is imperative that an exposed person will wear a fitting mask at all times when around others for 10 days after exposure. People who are vaccinated and boosted usually are off the hook for quarantine. Individuals who have received their booster shot do not need to quarantine following exposure, but should wear a mask for 10 days after, just as a precaution. For all those exposed, best practice would also include a SARS-CoV test after 5 days of exposure. If symptoms occur, individuals should immediately quarantine until a negative test confirms symptoms are not attributable to COVID. I mean, this makes sense, right? Gotcha, Astro. This makes sense. Maybe that's why they're saying to double mask. Many masks don't fit that well. Yeah, the whole point of the mask, even the less quality masks, as long as you have a something to cover your face properly to limit the amount of droplets that come out, right? Is better than no mask. And yeah, if you don't have a well-fitting mask and you need to put something over it, another mask to tighten it or to make sure it's worn properly, then do so. I mean, it's not that difficult. Multiple studies, time and time again, have proven the efficacy of masks being able to reduce the viral load or to reduce the droplets that escape from respiratory illnesses. Even before this pandemic even happened, we have research to indicate that, yeah, it turns out wearing something to limit the amount of droplets that come out are better. Most of the people I find who talk about election integrity are essentially disgruntled at outcomes they can't accept. They were not as backed as they thought they were. It's an ego thing more than anything. I suspect some of that is true. I suspect that is a factor, but like, you know, these are the same people. These are the same people who talk about personal responsibility. Dude, take your L. Take your L, bro. Take your L. It's okay. It's okay. These are the same people who talk about democracy and freedom, right? Can't accept a outcome that was done by the people. I mean, it's really funny, and that's the whole irony of it, right? Yeah, sure. Post the name and author. Post the name and author here. With the sheer volume of new cases that we're having, and we expect to continue with Omicron, one of the things that we want to be careful is that we don't have so many people out. We want people to get back to jobs, particularly essential jobs, to keep society running smoothly. Right. So the point is, okay, cool. To the podcasting that they did, cool. Do you want me to post that to the chat? Do you want me to post the chat? If you want, I mean, I don't know how interested people are in this kind of thing. I mean, hey, maybe. Maybe. Boosters greatly lowered the risk that someone will get infected and pass the virus to someone else. Data from South Africa and the UK demonstrated that vaccine effectiveness against infection for 2 doses is approximately 35%. A vaccine booster restores that vaccine effectiveness to 75%. Wow. That is pretty good. Most success, a rate of more than 50% to 60% would be considered a success. The Omicron variant is spreading quickly and has the potential to impact all facets of our society. CDC's updated recommendations for isolation and quarantine balance what we know about the spread of the virus and the protection provided by vaccination and boosters. These updates ensure people can safely continue their daily lives. Prevention is our best option. Get vaccinated, get boosted, wear a mask. Yeah, so on and so forth. This isn't like anything different that we've heard. With the caveat that we know now, maybe isolation or quarantine doesn't need to be as long, but you've got to take precautions and you've got to be responsible, okay? If you do happen to have COVID, you can, and are not showing symptoms, then sure, you're good to go. 5 days, just wear a mask just in case. I mean, that's it. It's not that difficult, okay? It's not that difficult. And you may not even need to go out those entire 5 days, but if you do, just wear a mask. That's it. It's not that difficult. It's not that difficult. Roger Stone strategized to stop the steal in 2016, registering that domain name, but they didn't need it until 2020. Huh. So they had a backup plan in case they lost 2016. Was that the deal? I wouldn't be surprised. Last week, the CDC updated its guidance for healthcare workers with COVID who show no symptoms or have mild symptoms, say they can return to work after 7 days if they test negative for infection at that point. Right, makes sense. Previously, people who were exposed to COVID but had not tested positive were advised to quarantine for 14 days, and people who tested positive were advised to isolate for 10 full days. Right. That's just what we knew at the time. That's what we knew at the time. Now, we know that as long as people take the proper precautions and have responsibility, then it's fine. He was inspired by 2000. Oh, wow. Yikes. That being said, this article only strengthens, this argument only strengthens the reasoning for vaccination. That's it. Hey. Hey, here's a cool story. Peter Navarro's name hasn't come up when it comes to the January 6th attack on the Capitol and the last-minute plot to overthrow the 2020 election, but his recent published memoir admits exactly to that. It's published, you can look this up. The Daily Beast revealed on Monday that Navarro's book cites Stephen Bannon as a cohort in a Hail Mary attempt to stop the election certification. It kind of corroborates the on record claims that Steve Bannon made on his podcast about January 5th, right? He said that while they were in that hotel room, they were attempting to see what they could do to kill the Biden presidency in its infancy. That was pretty much the direct quote from Stephen Bannon. Master Files, how's it going? Was the one who planned the Bush Gore stop the steal shit, so he's just doing what he's done before. I didn't know that. Is that true? If so, wow. Nothing new here. Oh, Stone claims to have been involved in 2000. Many people doubt he had anything to do with it. Who knows? Furthermore, Navarro confessed that he coordinated Republican members of Congress to do it. That claim could explain the apology text message that Mark Meadows turned over to the committee reading, "I'm sorry, quote, retried." This just keeps getting better and better. Remember I told you folks that as the January 6th investigation chugs along, that we would be finding out more and more information about this? Yeah. The co-conspirators even named the mission, calling it the Great Green Bay Sweep. When discussing it in an interview with the Beast, he named Representative Paul Gosar. Huh. And of course, Cancun Ted Cruz and as officials who helped spearhead the effort. Nice. Nice. We spent a lot of time lining up over 100 congressmen, including some senators. It started out perfectly at 1 p.m. Gosar and Cruz did exactly what was expected of them. Very interesting. Very interesting. And who expected that exactly? It was a perfect plan and all predicated on peace and calm at the Capitol Hill. We didn't even need any protesters to get up. We had over 100 congressmen committed to do it. Nice. Nice. Very cool. That commitment appeared as Congress was certifying the 2020 Electoral College votes reflecting Joe Biden beat Trump. Oops. Senator Cruz signed off on Congressman Gosar's official objection to counting Arizona's electoral ballots, an effort that was supported by dozens of other Trump loyalists. Nice. It is unknown whether the House committee has caused Cruz and Gosar to testify or requested documents from them. However, Navarro's book may be a catalyst that sparks the subpoenas. I mean, it's in a book. It's in a book. That's true. He was involved in Nixon's campaign. Navarro explained that the goal was to run out the clock to pressure then Vice President Mike Pence to stop the certification, something he believed he had no power to do, which constitutionally, to my understanding, he legitimately does not. As Pence's book revealed, he had already spoken to former Vice President Dan Quayle about the request. In other words, this happened. This happened, and Mike Pence went as far as attempting to maybe even look into it. Maybe even indulge the idea. They thought that the speeches from 100 members would force the media to cover the unproven conspiracy theories about election fraud that were never proven. Instead, thousands of Trump supporters ascended on the Capitol in a violent attack, sending those same members running for their lives. Remember, it was just a peaceful protest, right? It was just like a tour, like a tour. After running to each chamber, many of avid Trump supporters were unwilling to oppose the election any further.
We needed a new home.
Whoa! The Green Bay Sweep was very thought out. It was designed to get us 24 hours of televised hearings. Okay. It was designed to get us 24 hours of televised hearings, but we thought that we could bypass the corporate media by getting the stuff televised. Okay. Bannon allegedly warned on his show that all hell's gonna break loose, but he later tried to correct the record, saying he wasn't talking about the violence, but about Pence. That part I believe. Well, I was talking about Pence, call the play, run the play. Pence was going to send it back to Arizona, send it back to Georgia, send it back to Pennsylvania. Bannon never spoke to Pence, who never had any intention of sending the election back to the states. My role was to provide the receipts for the 100 congressmen or so that would make their case, who could rely, in part, on the body of the evidence I collected, Navarro confessed to the Beast, to lay the legal predicate for the actions to be taken. In other words, they were trying to do this using some very faulty legal logic, legalese logic, I don't know the word. They tried to do this through some faulty preconception of the system, of how things work, of how the electoral process works. And of course they failed, because even if things went as smooth as they wanted it to, there was never going to be a scenario where they would just be able to overturn that, right? The reason being is because there was never any sufficient evidence to legitimize the claims that were being put forth, right? There was never any real evidence to suggest that there was some massive voter election fraud, or whatever you want to call it. That was never going to fly. The only thing that they were going to do, let's say it went out, let's say it played out perfectly, right? The worst that was going to happen is that they were going to delay the inevitable, first of all, and B, I think that even worse would probably, I would think that because they went through all of these, attempting to go through all these procedural ways, may have broken the institutions even further, and further eroded the faith of the American people. Arguably more damaging than what happened, because when people saw what happened on January 6th, they realized, and they started to realize that this was all based on a lie, and this was the inevitable outcome. Son admired Roy Cohn, who left country with McCarthy hearings, wanted to do stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. But like, this was never going to work. No massive election fraud efforts have been uncovered. Any individual crimes wouldn't have seen any change in the outcome. Stephen Bannon's role was to figure out how to use this information, what he called receipts, to overturn the election results. That's how Steve came up with the Green Bay sweep idea. The political and legal beauty of the strategy was this: by law, both the House and Representatives and Senate must spend up to 2 hours of debate per state on each requested challenge. For the 6 battleground states, that would add up to as much as 24 hours of nationally televised hearings across the 2 chambers of Congress. When Navarro woke up on January 6th, whoa! And he got a text message from Bannon saying the Green Bay sweep was a go, called play, run the play. Wow. But yeah, keep telling me that there was no attempt to coordinate anything. What I want to know is the extent of the role that these representatives, senators, and potentially the president at the time had. I want to know the exact extent of that. And I want to know, is there going to be any consequences? Because this seems like a very, very well coordinated attempt, despite being based on faulty procedural knowledge. He also said he was scheduled to speak to the crowds at Ellipse, but ultimately wasn't in the cards. Navarro was grateful because he really needed to focus his attempt on overthrowing the election. Nice meme. It was better for me to spend that morning working on Green Bay sweep, just checking to see that everything was in line, and that the congressmen were on board. It was a pretty mellow morning for me. I was convinced that everything was set in place. Stop it.
In a dry climate.
Bannon hasn't commented on the fact that Navarro implicates him in his book. Read the full interview and experts from Navarro's book at the Daily Beast. Yeah, this happened. This is unbelievable.
And with Realtor.com's draw on map feature, we found this.
This is unbelievable that this is kind of just casually out there. Just casually. You know, there was a very, very well coordinated attempt at getting the election results in their heads. It was going to be overturned.
In a very dry climate.
In their heads, it was going to be overturned. And they were willing to go through with the whole plan. Very coordinated. Probably done with God knows how many months or how much time of planning. And it's just not seen that much in the media. It's just not seen that much in the media. And this is just like casually these folks who not only are representatives, senators, just casually getting together, attempting to overrule the will of the people. Amazing. Amazing that this isn't like wall to wall to wall to wall to wall coverage. That like literally that should be front and center. But you know, nice meme. Nice meme. I knew it. Like I said, the more these January 6th investigations come forth, the more we're gonna find out and just how coordinated and how deep this conspiracy goes. public hearings are coming in the spring or summer? Yeah, and I suspect we're gonna know even more. Quote, how to steal an election, seeding an area with heavy potential Democratic votes with as many absentee ballots as possible, targeting and convincing potential voters to complete them in a legally valid way, and then harvesting and counting the results. This is Rand Paul, everybody. Again, a senator who is a, elected member. Just, again, continuing to sow and destroy trust in what little semblance of the facade of democracy or democratic systems that we have in this country. Here we have Senator Rand Paul just kind of taking a bat to it. Taking effectively a baseball bat to it. Again, I'm sure that this guy is going to go on the pretense of election integrity and things like that. And, it's unbelievable to me. But of course, this is on the American conservative. Democrats seem to know that they cannot win a national election without employing the same tactics they used to win 2020. Wow. Can you explain that? CEO of Stacey Abrams' new founded Georgia Project said if there isn't any what's repeat what happened in 2020, we're effed. True. The reason why Democrats won in 2020 is very simple. Very simple. A, unprecedented turnout. Unprecedented turnout that hasn't been seen in like 100 years. 2, Trump's gross level of incompetence kind of sealed his fate along with the pandemic and economic crises. 3, the Democratic platform had some very good things in it. On paper. It moved things in the right direction on paper. That is why the results happened the way they did in Georgia, right? It mobilized people because it turns out when you give people something to vote for, it mobilizes them. Wow, I know it's a high resolution strategy. I get it. Which is why they won Georgia. Not one, but the 2 seats that they needed was won based on, in my opinion, solely on the platform that motivated people to get out there, right? Not only that, there was also a pretty impressive ground game on part of the Democratic Party in Georgia. They knew that was the Hail Mary. Which this statement is true. If they can't figure out how to repeat what they did in 2020, they're effed, alright? And I already said it. You want to win? You want to win elections? Well, you got to give people A, something to vote for, and B, you got to deliver. If not, you're effed. What happened in 2020 involved a highly coordinated and privately funded shadow campaign for Joe Biden that took place in the formal structure of the election system itself, through the injection, this rhetoric, of over $419 million of Mark Zuckerberg's and Priscilla Chan's money laundered through the Center of Technology of Civic Life, the Center of Election Innovation, and Research. The professional left presided over a targeted, historically unprecedented takeover of government election offices by nominally nonpartisan but demonstrably ideological and nonprofit organizations and activists in key areas of swing states such as Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Wow. Our research showed that CTL spending in Wisconsin generated enough votes for Joe Biden to secure him an electoral win there in 2020. Oh, so what? Joe Biden, we estimate that the CTCL spending in Wisconsin purchased Joe Biden an additional 65,222 votes, without which Donald Trump would have won the state by 44,000. Oh, really? Can you explain, or can you cite the evidence for how this money purchased votes, because that is very loaded language, right? This is part of the whole media literacy kind of deal, right? And knowing what you're reading. Knowing what you're reading. Obviously, this is from the quote American conservative. But the language here is just very loaded. Purchased. Wow. This all comes back to the turnout myth. It's just pervasive belief that if turnout goes automatically benefits the Democratic Party. It's linked to replacement theory, which again is another thing that people constantly seem to cite even when they don't realize it. Just as constant electrocopium is somehow the reason why your guy lost is some of the most nefarious act, rather than just saying they weren't the right person at that time. I'm just not meaning Republicans in that statement. It applies to a lot of prominent political commentators, activists, and general public people in the US. You think so? I mean, like, I know you've talked about this before, but certainly the massive amount of people, the unprecedented turnout, people just didn't want Trump. Is that a fair statement? The Trump motivated the masses to vote against him. Would it be a fair statement to say that Donald Trump motivated people to vote against him? Motivated the monumental turnout to vote against him? Yeah, but then I don't think that means the turnout benefits Democrats in that instance. It just means that turnout definitely doesn't help a blundering buffoons reliant on a strong group of partisans. Yeah, so, okay, so maybe I should reflect on the way that I word things. Because the idea is there, right? The idea that I perpetuate, that I have in my head is there, right? The way to win is to give people something to vote for, right? Policies, things like that. People didn't vote for Joe Biden because he's Joe Biden or because he was a Democrat. Simple as that. Maybe I should reframe the way I word things, but so I think I know what you're saying, James Snapper. So I'm going to try my best to rephrase the way I word things to better illustrate the point that I'm trying to make. Trump motivated me to give up on the Republican Party entirely and become a full-blown socialist. Comrade Trump. Thank you. Comrade Trump. Appreciate that. Our research shows that, oh yeah, so the language on this. Purchased Joe Biden and just additional 65,222 votes. Like, what does that mean? Does that mean that people are out there like buying votes? Because like that's the language. When you see that, I'm sure they're going to also mention the fact that Trump in 2016, and I'm sure that he did some similar strategy in 2020, was very active when it comes to the digital campaign, which he bought a ton of money for ads and things like that. Funneled money through Facebook and whatever ad services that were provided, especially in the 2016. Although CTL and CIR are charted as nonpartisan, the corporations are researchers that the 419 million of the CTCL and CEIR spending that took place in 2020 was highly partisan in distribution and highly partisan in its effects. Really? So we're using one election to then dictate, because what if I go back and look at the history of the funding of these two, am I going to find only Democrats, or am I going to find a more balanced level of spending? And it just so happens to be that the 2020 election, they swung one way or the other. I don't know. I don't trust these people. Trump's put in a lot of work wiping out his base. A long way to go, but there's progress. Hey, Dustin. Unless something unprecedented means that they'll vote, but they're hard to predict. True. Turnout definitely impacts elections, but not in the way people think. Turnout is important. Come to the point that they're activated. So the moment they incentivize to turn out and vote. Now, that changes all the time. There are people who always vote and always vote their team. Then there's people infrequent who will activate or deactivate based on what's happening in the country, nation. Then there's non-voters who are usually not encouraged at all. Yep, that is a fair assessment. Fair assessment. Yeah, so anyways, Rand Paul is signal boosting an article that's rife with election conspiracy theories and attempting to shake what tiny thread thread of democracy or facade of democracy that we have. And this guy's just out here completely fine with attempting to shred it, whatever thread of it is left. And I love his little Twitter bio. I fight for the Constitution, individual liberty, and freedoms that make this country great by destroying these things. By destroying these things. It's a weird way of showing it. It's always funny how they talk about these things, but always end up doing the opposite. Very, very interesting. Democracy is a threat to their power. Clearly, they took a massive L and they're all up in arms about it. It's a kind of complex interplay between group identities and issue salience. Everyone has identities that they hold on a kind of tier of importance, and their tier, and that tier, depending on how hard someone falls into each one, can be altered just a little bit by priority. So say a woman has an identity that's very powerful, usually is in the top 2 to 3 priorities, but if say abortion is on the ballot, they might go to number 1. The salient issue is instead of the GOP, they might align by ideology. Yeah. I mean, of course, because everybody, it's very complex in the sense that also, like, people aren't a monolith either, right? People have sometimes very weird individual, like, priorities and taste, and something that you think might activate that group or that person because they belong to that group doesn't actually end up happening, right? Sometimes you end up doing the opposite. It just depends on the person. So that's what I assume, which is why it's so hard to get a lock on it, because, well, there are generalities that you can, I don't want to say assume, but assume. There are some generalities that you can assume about people. It doesn't always fit for everybody. I'm almost too scared to scroll down too far. More leftist grouping people. Hey Eric, how's it going? This is also why I think Republicans' obsession with abortion is a wolf in sheep's clothing. For them, it's always useful as a rhetorical tool in the debates, but the moment they act on it, if they say overturn Roe v. Wade, then they'll likely see electoral collapse. As soon as the chips far down, voters, and particularly women, will show their true priority on abortion and push back against the GOP. Oh, 100%. But the problem is, I think that they are doing serious harm in the meantime, right? I mean, these laws were effectively passed, and yeah. Bigotry rampant on the left, confirmed. True. True. I'm okay, good to see you. Good to see you. Issues are used as a control. Why don't they lock down abortion rights and keep the issue in play to exploit it to win elections? Well, they're quite capable and quite effective at clamping down abortion rights. They've been doing it. They feel like now's their time. Have we not seen a wave across all red states, across all Republican legislature, attempting to strip abortion rights? It's good to see you too, Eric. I hope you had a good holiday weekend. Hello, friends and enemies. I'm back. Howdy. I'm talking about the Dems too. They want to keep it in play over the years because it helps them motivate their base. Oh, I see. Yeah, we need forced vasectomy laws. Yeah, that's how we'll be fair and balanced. Because clearly, we're not taking this issue seriously. We need mandatory vasectomies because, you know, I know this is a radical concept, a wild concept, but it actually, and hear me out, it actually takes two people for a pregnancy to happen, for a child to happen. I know, it's amazing. It takes two people. So then you have to ask yourself, well then why is only one getting all the rules? I'm all for gender equality. Men have to have mandatory vasectomies. Period. They haven't done anything more drastic than they have been since the 90s. Gradual chipping away at abortion rights, right? The Chinese Ministry of State Security has been hunting for smuggling money to Hong Kong protesters. Had to make sure there was no tankies here. If they totally end Roe v. Wade protections, it is an interesting question. How many will bother showing up to vote after that? I don't know. It could be the opposite. It could be a massive backlash. It could be the opposite, where you end up motivating the Democratic side, and punish the GOP. However, that is a disturbing thought, Dustin, to see that the end result of just ending Roe v. Wade would actually depress turnout for, you know, the incapability of the Democratic Party to sufficiently fight against it. I think the smart play of Republicans would be just to keep it hanging. But then if you're asking partisans not to think that they're right about everything, it won't be happening. So you can only hope that the backlash happens. That was at least a trend of women leading the GOP a decade ago. A few decades ago, when the issue became a thing, they abandoned the party for far more than men did. True. I have no idea what that means, my friend. No idea what that means. I was thinking about Republican voters where the only issue is abortion. I think they would just get depressed. Turnout. Oh, you mean, okay, so you mean like on the Republican side, because the issue is no longer an issue, they've done away with it. there's no need to vote because, well, why? That makes sense, but I don't know. I don't know. The reality is, I think that the consequences would far out, would be far worse, if they do away with it. If they overturn, they risk activating the big group of rich white women. That group can turn an election. That group can lobby, they can donate, they can pressure and make life very uncomfortable for Republicans. Campaign of the President of Chile? Gotcha. Maybe so. Any of these things are quite possible, to be frank. Any of these things are quite possible. Regardless, I still think that it would do more harm to eliminate Roe versus Wade than any like downstream consequences of maybe depressing further GOP turnout or the amount of backlash may be not as good as just leaving protections of Roe v. Wade in place. I don't know. I don't know how that utilitarian or utilitarian consequentialist calculus goes with that one. I would prefer if these were just not touched at all. Just leave it alone. I think that Republicans are so against abortions because their mothers tried but failed and just... Oh my god. No. 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 Why did this get auto-modded? Alright, I'll abortion law in the current form were largely a consequence of wealthier white women, most because minority women were so disempowered and they're likely to be a factor again. It's only because there's so much support for it. Abortion is one of those rare topics that a majority of Americans agree on from all sides of the spectrum, especially in extreme circumstances. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Right or left? I don't know. I'd like to think that I can use both hands. I'm actually ambidextrous. I can actually write with both hands, so I don't know how to answer that question. That being said, thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Saludos desde Chile. Howdy. That's why it's a super risky plan from Republicans, but I guess they see this as their only chance before it's definitely too late. Yeah, if their game plan, if their like high resolution idea is to eliminate Roe versus Wade, because of some, I don't know, some ideological thing that they just have to have absolute control over a person's body, this would be the time the Supreme Court is favorable. Mitch McConnell and the Trump administration allowed like hundreds of federal judges and things like that. But if they fail, then I think that Roe v. Wade survives the test of time, because like that's it. I mean, if they couldn't do it now, there's no way they'll be able to rally this again. So here's to hoping that they fail. Alligator or crocodile? What is that other one? Not alligator, not crocodile. What's that other one? Cayman. Cayman. That's my answer, misinformation. How's it going? If the Republicans eliminate Roe versus Wade, they'll risk a permanent decrease in their women voters. Yes. But that may cement, that may strengthen other base, parts of their base, right? I don't know. I really don't know what the potential. That part I do believe. They'll see a significant decrease in women voters permanently, maybe. But I don't know if like, I don't know if that's like a better consequence than just leaving Roe versus Wade, right? Because the protections that it offers far outweigh anything. I don't know. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Caimans are a mix? A hoax? Nah, you're a hoax. Yeah, I just don't know what the calculus would be. From my point of view, I think that it is more beneficial to leave Roe versus Wade, leave it alone, leave these protections alone. It would be a better good. It would have better outcomes. I think there's higher chances of them losing women voters than gaining men. Men are largely victims of partisanship when it comes to abortion. I think they'll just continue to do what their party tells them for the most part. Again, going back decades ago when it became a thing where women shifted than men who instead just conformed to the party position, even if it meant changing their original stance. Yeah, I agree with that assessment. Hominem and you both said that women will definitely leave the GOP, which is true, but what will that mean for the long term? I mean, if Roe v. Wade is gone, it's gone. How do you repair that? Can you repair that? I don't know how much damage that would go down the line. Would there be an attempt to codify that into law? Would there be an attempt to, a movement then to just codify that into legislation? I don't know. This is actually talked about in that book, Democracy for Realists. It's very interesting as a study on group politics, an almost perfect example. Gotcha. Yeah, because like, what are the domino effects and, what are the domino effects and ramifications? Yeah, hey, just move to another state, forehead. What an asinine solution to this. What an asinine solution. Well, if the women don't like the law, they can just move to another state. Absolute clown. Maybe it will activate independent and non-voting women more than shrink the GOP. What else do you think is going to happen? What do you mean, what else do I think? What else has happened in the past? You didn't read? They'll try. Okay, yeah, and what money would they have or resources? The only thing that this wouldn't affect would be wealthy people, right? Would be wealthy women who just can leave. That's it. That is a very small subsect of women. Everybody else is pretty much fucked. We all know Republicans are misogynistic, but you hear about these stories about presidents' misconduct. And you hear this misogyny coded in dog whistles. It doesn't really click, but when you see your own rights restricted, you look at the teenage girl next to you who couldn't get an abortion, and all the effects click in. The misogyny goes from abstract to concrete. Yeah, true. But again, I don't know how much the damage would be down the line. You asked what could possibly happen if Roe v. Wade can get overturned. Yeah, the biggest change would most likely be changing states if they're not in favor of the law, and feel like it can't be influenced anymore. I think that you're underestimating that, to be quite frank. To be quite honest with you, I think you're underestimating the effects of what could possibly happen. Most people can't just change states. What else do you predict would happen? Well, I would say that a lot of illegal backdoor abortions, which could have potential risks for women. I could see that also more people dying because they don't have access to this. I could see that people who have unwanted pregnancies will have ramifications and domino effects for the child. For the child as well. I mean, it's also possible the actual occurrence can be lower if abortions are outlawed. Wrong. It's never the case. Because we all know that drug use was lowered when it's outlawed. There could be a suffragette movement, a rise for the women's, a parallel to BLM, maybe. After Roe v. Wade, abortions had a 70% increase. Maybe in the initial, but right now abortions are at an all-time low, from what I understand. I could be wrong. Well, it's an easy way to test to see if there's any movement of people after any major policy change in the notion. Yeah, drugs, drug cartels selling abortion medication. Anyways, the TLDR is, yeah, we all saw what happens when you outlaw drugs, right? It was an all-time, yeah, no. Here's my take. Correct. After the massive bump a few years, I started to go down pro-life movements, which made people abstain from abortions and due to birth control. Yeah, pro-life is actually a meme. They're not pro-life. You're not pro-life. There's no such thing. No such thing. You're pro-controlling women. Can you tell me in chat if you're streaming a bit longer, like a few hours, or can someone in chat tell me if oh no, I'm actually about to sign off, Sir for McGoody. Do you want to raid? I could send everybody over to you, or we can, if you're coordinating a raid here, send them to other folks. It means protecting the right to life of every human being. It doesn't. Get over yourself. It doesn't. Get over yourself. It doesn't. Almost entirely the 20th century. It was very clear the right to women as citizens came before the right life of an unborn baby. I didn't miss the show. Nice. Yes, it does. You can pretend it doesn't, but it doesn't change the fact. Wrong. You're pro-life? Really? That's fascinating. Would you be in favor of increasing the child tax credits for working families to increase resources for children? Would you be in favor of increasing revenue to make sure that kids have lunches and all that other stuff? Hey, Cocter. Yes. Wow, amazing. That's good. Pro-life equals pro-birth. Yeah, that's what it really means. Pro-life is just pro-birth. You're trying to just force women to have births that they didn't want to. That's all it is. But howdy, Cocter. I appreciate that. Thank you. You would be actually in favor of providing resources to the families. Not like the GOP over here. Because I know you're from Germany. Not like the GOP over here who wants to eliminate resources for children and families and things like that. So you're not going to fool me into believing your nonsense. Sorry. I have a very, 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 very low patience when it comes to like this issue. The reality is the government has no business telling you what you can and cannot do with your body. Right, that's not pro-life. Stealing resources. Yeah. You see the hypocrisy in real time, folks? You see the hypocrisy in real time? No, of course you're not gonna want resources to be allocated for children and working families. Absolute fucking clown. Anyways, folks, it is 11:28. I do gotta get going. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. Thank you, Heat. By the way, follow Heat420_. Do it. Thank you for the follow, Spectex. Gian, Based Bastard, thank you. It's not hypocrisy, been consistent. Show me where I made a contradiction. You said you're pro-life, and then you don't want to allocate resources for children. Anyways, folks, it is just about that time. Very dogmatic pro-life. Yeah, I know. It's very dogmatic. Anyways. Women are people, and stop fucking allowing the government telling people what they can and cannot do. Pro-life doesn't mean steal parent. Yeah, get fucked. Absolutely get fucked. So yeah, women are people, and they have the absolute right to make their own choices with regards to their own body. With that being said, thank you for joining us. As always, low tier argument. There we go. Yeah. Anyways. You care about pro-life and yeah, they only care about it up until it's born up, and after that, it's bootstraps, folks, bootstraps. Anyways, guys, sorry I don't have patience for this absolute nonsense. I do want to thank you all. I love you all, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. See ya. If you want to get more clowned on, join us 9 a.m. tomorrow, Real Conda. If you want to continue to get clowned on, join us tomorrow at 9 a.m. I love clowning on people like you. Have a good one. You have a good one. Alright, folks, hang tight. You take care. We're heading out in 5, 4, 3. Stay here, everybody. 2, 1. Here we go.